Okay, we have a 4 by 6 inch photo print of some clouds. These are all free for download on my Flickr account, and I'll put a link to that in the description section. And we're going to try out a composition that I've been playing around with a lot lately, using the Seaside Cove. You can use the large or small one. And maybe some palm trees. We'll see how this goes here. Alright, now I've picked out a print here that had some cloud structures down here, and you can always kind of decide which way you want these to go. You could even go this way. But I figured when you're working around an existing image in the background, you want to, that plays into the consideration of kind of how you're going to use this, because there's certain degrees of contrasts that are happening throughout that. Now, what I've done on my Flickr photographs is, of the clouds, most of them, most of the recent ones, what I've done is I've decreased the contrast in them, which doesn't make for an interesting photograph in itself, but it makes for easier photo stamping because there's less hard edges where like a white cloud would meet like a dark blue sky or something like that. If you stamped over it, that type of thing would show through. So I've tried to decrease the contrast while retaining some of the differences that make sky photographs interesting. On some of them I even remove the color so that you can color your sky anything you wanted it to. Okay, so this is just regular dye-based ink. I'm using Marvy on the photo, and it stamps out just fine. In fact, it really stamps out clean due to this emulsion surface. It kind of grabs the ink, which for like the glazed, layered dye-based ink type of applications, it can make it harder to blend that ink out because that emulsion really dries fast. But for photo stamping, it works great due to that quick drying aspect. Photo paper, I don't know what this one's, I don't know if it's more industrial or if it's the same type of paper we use at home for inkjet printers, but I just got this printed out at Costco, and I would imagine it's the same type of ink that we would find for our home-based applications. Okay, now this is the Tiny Rocks stamp, and I'll go for multiple impressions, but usually I like to make it a little bit darker on the edges here and lighter in the middle, so the lighter in the middle ones can just be like the second or third impressions you make with it. So you go from dark to light like that, so you get some variation within that space. Okay, so I'm trying to decide whether I want to stamp these right now or later. Let's do it right now. I was thinking about laying down some, how I usually color these is with alcohol markers, and if I put that alcohol marker foundation on here, I'm not quite sure if the dye-based ink will stamp over it cleanly, so we want to do that right now. Okay, now in photographs, what I've found is, at least with me, I like to go with VersaFine foreground imagery because it's really dark, but VersaFine is, while it's a really dark ink, it's also an oil-based ink, and I've stamped on photographs with oil-based pigment inks, and I've touched them like days later, and it feels as wet as when it was first applied, so I wouldn't recommend that. Okay, so these are the palm stalks right here. I'll kind of flank this composition with these trees. It has 3 of them on here, but over here I just used 2 and just a tiny bit of that third. I kind of want it. I'm kind of leaning them in from both sides so that it kind of leans into the composition, kind of frames it off like that. I mean, you can have it go the other way as well, or you can have it just go straight up. It's up to you. I hadn't used these palm fronds and trees in so long. It's kind of going nuts with them. Okay, and you just aim that little bit right there, and you just kind of aim it, you know, to get right on top of the stalk right like that. And I usually do the right side ones, the left leaning like that into it. Okay, on the left side of the stalks, each stalk. Remember, there's a stalk out here too, so you can have it coming in from over here like this. Okay, and then this one, I'll be going this way. I just kind of, I'm lowering my kind of vantage point so I can kind of see where that ends up over here. Most of you are using like acrylic blocks, you know, see-through acrylic blocks, so it's probably a little bit easier, but I don't know. After you use these a couple times, it's you get really familiar with that, even if you're using a wood block version. It kind of looks like a little jumble, but then where you have the isolated ones coming down like that, it, you know, the clarity of the image will show through, so it just becomes somewhat of a solid canopy up here, which, you know, is kind of what you're going after. Okay, I think I'll use one more of these ones. Something like that. So it really frames the scene off like that. Then you have the isolated ones coming down. Okay. Oh, we can put something out here. Here's a sailboat. Maybe I'll use something a little bit smaller on this. Let's put some gulls in the background. Like this. I might blot them off. Maybe I'll go for a lighter touch. Like so. Slightly lighter than black. You know, because I did use the second impression. So it kind of recedes a little bit and goes back in the distance. And let's see. Oh, I just happen to have this one right here. It's my little kayaker. I'm going out for a afternoon row, maybe. What do you call it? Row or paddle? I have no idea. Oh, the surfer would have been good too. Right here, standing up right here. Next time. I don't want to do two. It kind of looks a little bit cluttered. Okay, so let's check this out. I think all of my impressions, there's quite a bit of ink up in these areas. I'm going to let this set up for about 10 minutes and I'll come back to it and we'll start coloring this in and do a little bit of our ink embellishments, alcohol ink embellishments, pigment ink. Let's do something else too. I haven't really used my palm stalks in conjunction with some of these reeds here. Let's put some grass at the base here. It kind of helps soften up the transitions between the stalks and the you know, those hard edges, you know, angles of the stalks and the ground down here, don't you think? Okay, so looking pretty good, really fast. Fast processes when you're doing photo stamping and, you know, having an existing background like that really kind of expedites the entire process. So makes for a fun exercise too, and kind of working around an existing background like that is, it's a fun process because it kind of makes you have to think about the incorporation of those types of elements within your composition. Now, a lot of people just used to stop and just put impressions on top of photographs and then they'd be done, but I like to flesh out the scene a little bit more. You know, this whole scene right here just looks like a window for all those clouds that are going on in the background, but we want to incorporate the imagery in and give it visual weight, and that's what we'll do with some alcohol and pigment inks coming up. Okay, we're back, and it has been about 10 minutes or so. Let me give a touch here. I think there's a little bit of ink buildup here. It's where I've overlapped kind of a freshly inked up black pad, and I've put about, in some of these areas, there's probably about a 4 times overlap, where I've overlapped those fronds against itself and the other frond up there, as well as the stalks. So I'm just going to be kind of careful about coloring anything out there. I don't think I'm going to color up there anyways. It's going to be mostly in this water area down below. And what I'll do is I'll grab some blue pens. This one's almost the same color as that one, but these are all alcohol pens right here, brush marker tipped. You can try things like water-based ones too, Tombow, La Plume, that type of thing. Okay, now what I like to do is I like to go in with a different value pens, okay? Darks, medium, light. And a lot of times I like to start off with the lightest one. Now this one's not going to show up at all in here. Well, I could see it a little bit. But what this can also do is it adds a little bit of a coating of alcohol down there, or whatever media binder is in this pen. And I'm adding it into the shadow areas within the design. You can see the specifically the areas underneath the lip of the wave, the crest. And I'm adding some ink into that. And then what I like to do is I like to go in with the darker one, and I'll reiterate that. See that kind of slight glaze? That's adding, that little bit of dimension and value, mass, etc. It's visual weight to that area. Now, when I say area, I'm not talking about the entire ocean scene, okay? I'm talking about just the areas where it's darker on the image, okay? Meaning the shadows. All right. Now, I mean, that doesn't mean you can't color in whole areas, but I would see this more as like a varied fabric, okay? It's like draping or something like that. It's not all just, if a drape is red and it's all, if it's not laying flat, there's going to be folds in it, so there's going to be, kind of darks and lights within that space. So you can see where I'm starting to develop that in here. I'm putting those darker areas underneath the lip here. Let me hold this up here and I'll show you what I mean. See, this is a darker one yet. It's not a dark pen, but it's just darker than the ones that I just used. But see how that's kind of giving the surface of this water, the ocean, it's giving it volumes like that now. So it's not just like the see-through window, to the clouds up there. You're kind of filling it in. See this right here? You can put a shadow on this kayaker. It's even here out in the distance on the side like that. I have those distant waves out that way as it's going around to the point. That's what we used to call it. Point breaks are always the best waves. I miss surfing. I don't miss getting up really super early and getting out in really cold water, but once you're out there, it's really fun. And your wetsuit warms you up. Okay, so that is the blue. Now, if this got too harsh and it was like way too dark, all you do is with alcohol pens, you just go back in and you just kind of blend it right back out. All right, so that looks pretty good. I mean, I can go darker, but let's add in, well, that's a little bit too light. Oh, dark right there. Let's go with these kind of beige toned colors, okay? Let's see what we have here. Camel, beige, and apricot. Okay, let's address some areas down here on the sand. Sand doesn't always have to be sandy colored either, you know, but it can be. Just adding it down here. I'm kind of being careful around these reeds, you know. So far I don't have any smearing. I'm just going right over the, you know, all the impressions, and it seems to be fine. If it smears a little bit, I never really worry about that. Because by the time I add in some additional white pigment ink effects, it's all supposed to blend in anyway. Alright, so that's a little bit harsh right here, so this is what I was talking about, going back in with a lighter tone. See this right here? That hard line? You just soften it up with a lighter color, or you can use your blending pen. I usually like to use a lighter version of that color rather than just, you know, clear. Okay, and I don't try to get it real smooth because I like texture, so. Alright, so a little bit of warmth in here. Okay, so let's take a look at some other areas in here. Let's do this right here. This is what I've been doing. It's always kind of fun to go and add in additional effects that you've been kind of playing around with in other media with a different media. So I've been doing this kind of harder horizon line with dye basting. So let's try it here with alcohol inks on photo paper. Okay. And see, I'm just trying this blending. I'm not, you know, toning the whole thing on. I'm trying to go for like this type of thing. Oh, you can see a little bit of black on my tip here. So it is picking up some of the thing. But what I'm doing is I'm doing these little streaks like this from this side and this streak from this side. So see how it tapers in like that? And that's what I'm trying for right here. Okay? So kind of creating a little bit of a, you know, a stronger horizon line as a separation from kind of surface and sky. Okay? And I like what I see there. This one's a super subtle one because this is a very light blue. Let's go for this one right here. I think it's salvia blue. I thought it was periwinkle. Okay, let's go for a little bit of a stronger line. Okay, now this one I'm going to have to blend in. Okay, so we have that. That's a harsher line right there. But on photo paper, alcohol inks just blend right in. It's almost like I'm removing a lot of it too. Alcohol inks just put that on. Photo paper just goes right back into solution. The alcohol inks really sit right on the top of the surface. So I don't think it's penetrating the emulsion at all. So it's easy to blend it in. So you can see that blue is really blended in quite easily on there. Okay, now let's go for a little bit of a, this, you know, with the palm trees, it has a more of a tropical kind of, you know, aspect to it. So let's add in a little bit of green. Green will give it that warmer looking blue. Sometimes it looks more inviting that way too. You know, having this warmth down there, you go for a bit of a temperature change. You know, down here in the sand as well. Sea foam, very pale sea foam mist type of coloring. So see what this is doing on that Seaside Cove right here? I don't feel that this is so much like just a straight window, you know, a transparent window for that cloud. We could have some textures down here, but it looks, I don't know, to me a little bit more as a reflection of the sky than, you know, the sky showing through, you know, the rubber stamp impression. Kind of the more you fill this in. And this is really fun too. I mean, and this is an aspect of lighting too. I'm not really coloring in too much right in here. So it's a little bit darker out here. Although these are some really light, you know, pens in general. They're not, you know, dark by any means. You know, that being said, I want to go a little bit darker down here, I think, to get those shadows a little bit more developed. I like to go for a little bit more contrast in some areas, and I'm going back in with my lighter one again. And I'm removing or blending in that shadow down there. See that? It's a real kind of different experience working on, say, photo paper with alcohol inks than it is glossy cardstock. Glossy cardstock, you're staining the surface with these pens, and you can kind of lift somewhat off cardstock, but not nearly as much as photo paper. Okay, so I mean that is in terms of the coloring. I mean, it's a really fun and easy process, very forgiving. Let's grab a cotton ball here and add in what I feel is a significant technique, process, whatever, with all of this. I love just this foundation. I mean, it's all of your impressions are really crisp and defined, but from a textural standpoint, having everything so crisp like this is okay, but I just find that adding in a whole different aspect from a textural standpoint and lighting aspect just kind of rounds things out. Okay, so I have this cotton ball here, and I dipped it in here, but that's going to be way too much ink on there. It's going to be real blotchy, especially with a new cotton ball. So what I'm doing is I'm blotting this off and removing a lot of the ink in here too. I'm pressing some of that ink back into the cotton ball as well, so I get a little bit smoother of an application. Use 100% cotton too if you can. The other acrylic ones are kind of resist the ink, and it's kind of harder to apply. Okay, now watch this area up here in the sky, where that cloud is. See, as I move from the cloud out a little bit, it has that frostier kind of feel to it. This is where I kind of get it started. Okay, let me show. I don't know if you can see it right out here. It's very subtle because I'm putting white against something that's not very dark. Okay. Oh, let me show you it right here. See, that's a little bit of darker area, so it should show up in here more because there's more contrast, okay? See that right there? Okay, do you see that right in that area? This one's going to be fairly subtle. I can put it over my gulls too, where they look a little bit farther back in the distance. Okay, see that right there? It's real soft. I, to me, it makes those clouds seem a little bit more dimensional. Okay, now let's bring that texture down here into the waves. Okay, so what we're doing is we're reiterating texture from one area, the farthest spot visually in the scene, to one of the closer ones right here. Okay, and what we're doing is we're introducing a textural continuity in the piece, and plus, I mean, this, this crashing waves and sea mist is it goes right along with the theme of the scene. Okay, so see this right here on this rock right here, it's kind of adding that soft aspect to these areas. Now, I could put some on this water surface here as well. Now, to me, this looks more like kind of early morning when you introduce all this fog into it. You're in the beaches in Lompoc, where I grew up, it's all day. High noon is super foggy out on the beaches out on the Air Force Base up there, Vandenberg. Okay, look at this. I'm putting some of this right into these trees, at the base of these trees, the stalks. See how that makes that stalk look a little bit different, right? Look at the difference between this one and this one, okay? Yeah, we'll move it up even higher. Look at that. And I've talked about this before. It's when you do this, you're kind of representing the space in between you and those objects in there. So it kind of makes us aware of the physical space around us. And when you're aware of that visually, from a kinesthetic point of view, touch, it kind of introduces touch into the visuals of a visual, two-dimensional piece of art or whatever. Okay, putting some of this up here in the trees too, on the fronds. So I'm making them a little bit lighter, and again, see when you do that, it changes the kind of perspective of these things in terms of depth. When you put a little bit of that, it looks a little bit farther back than this, right? So instead of this all being kind of on one two-dimensional plane, it just looks a little bit more deep and varied. Okay, so let me put some on this frond up here. And see, when I do it on that frond up here, it doesn't make this one look closer to us. And, it's just a few taps of this. So when you do that type of thing on various things, let's do it on the kayaker here as well. So I'll put kind of the front of the kayak in that light right there. Doesn't it look a little bit more varied? And it makes them feel incorporated into the scene like that. And I don't know, it just, everything seems a little bit more related that way. Okay, now let's go with the cotton swab here. Some of these things in here, as areas in here, are just much better served with a smaller applicator here. So here's what you want to avoid getting big blobs of paint in there. So what you do is just dab it off before you start applying it, and then use a really light tap. What happens is I tell people to take off a lot of ink, okay, before you start tapping it in. Now see, I'm tapping in here 10 times in one little tiny spot just for it to show up. But people aren't used to that at first when they first start doing this. So I tell them to take off a lot of ink, and then they do one tap and they can't see anything. So they do a smash tap, and then it gets this big blob, right? Okay? Because they're not used to that. They're used to kind of a color like out of a pen being a 100% version of that color. But what you're doing here is this represents like 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 14, 16, or something like that percent. It's probably more like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Then you get a 10% version of that ink on there, okay? So you want to apply, or even like a 0.5% at a time, where it barely shows up, okay? And then the more you tap, the more ink that's applied, and you can get the exact amount of ink down in any given area that you want, and not get these big blobs of application, okay? Just take it slow, in other words. But, I mean, slow doesn't mean real slow. We're not talking about in one little area there, it's like 2 or 3 seconds, you know, because you're tapping faster than 1 second at a time. Okay, putting a little bit more around that kayaker. Okay, now, right alongside the those clouds again, I think I want to put a little bit more. Visual continuity. We can do this too. We can mask this way. You know, we masked off to color the ocean. You can mask off right here and to create kind of more clouds on the horizon. Okay. There we go. So I kind of add a little bit more white down there, right in there. Let's take a look at this close up here. You can see these different areas right here can use a little bit, huh? Right at the crest of the wave. Okay, let's take a look now. So then I kind of put it right along the, what they call the crest of the spindrift coming off of there. So that it's not just a straight impression. Now I apply down here. It dries, the pigment ink dries and gets darker. So you can, you know, you might have to apply it twice in a given area. Okay, white paint pen. I have to kind of shake it up before every use. I can use this like, you know, 2 days in a row, and I still need to shake it, I find. Okay, let me see, I got a little touch of something up here. I don't know what from, but you can just kind of use this pen like a little eraser. Just tone it out. Okay, adding this kind of brighter areas on my clouds. Let me see it if I can get real close up here. Okay. Now that's pretty white up there, but it's not completely, so I can put a little bit of highlighting on some of these clouds. Alright, now you as viewers will be able to see what I do down here easier, because there's going to be a little bit more contrast. But see right out, again, right on the crest of these waves, just reference the design. You can see where there's lighter areas on the waves, and you just go in. You can add a little line work or a little few dots here and there. Don't go too crazy with this in the darker areas. And kind of hold it up at arm's distance periodically to take a look and see what effect these little white dots are having. They're just one little dot at a time, but they can be quite pronounced when you're adding it back in there. So what are we doing here? We added kind of a real diffused lighting with the white pigment ink, right? And this is adding lighting in a very defined manner. It's not diffused at all. It's very crisp when we're doing it this way. Or you can, fill in a whole area, too. But it really gives it a real kind of a defined highlight and crisp little, call it specular light in photography. It's light that's brighter than white. It's the light that's kind of reflecting, glistening off of anything. It's probably, when you're sitting here watching YouTube video, you can look at your computer and there's, specular light, coming off that, even if it's from the light of the screen or anything, There's specular light on this, there's that little highlight right there, right? That's what you're doing here. And it shines off everything. It's shining off this right here, my nails right here, everything. And that's all we're doing here, is we're introducing that. Sometimes, it's easy to go overboard, so what you do is you have to kind of hold it at arm's distance and take a look and see what's the overall. Otherwise, you might be kind of focusing on, only what you're doing, and then, you pull out and it's like, it looks like Christmas lights or something like that over everything, because there's just so much of it. So, it could just kind of be, what are we talking about? It's just awareness, kind of be aware of what you're doing. I don't know. I'm someone that, says, hey, I don't know what, maybe not on every scene, but go overboard. If you're having fun doing something, there is a certain degree of value in the finished work, okay? And I acknowledge that, but I think doing scenes is, a lot more about the process and having a good time during it. I don't have my one eye on the, the final result. They say when you have one eye on kind of this notion of the final, I don't know, whatever, result or whatnot, then you only have one eye with which to work. So, I don't know, have a fun time. That's what stamping is supposed to be about. I got a little dot up there. I know I've had some students in my classes where it's like, they're kind of working on a piece, and literally there's like a black dot, right here that's bothering them. It's not just, like one or two people. Some people are kind of focused in on that. But it's really about the experience of kind of just creating something and having a good time, and that's what stamping, I think, is really about. Okay, so anyways, so we started off with a photograph here, and I do feel that there is some visual weight and depth within the scene right here. Simple processes, in terms of just coloring in with your alcohol pens, or just markers, whatever markers you choose to use. I didn't use really dark ones. I kind of went with lighter ones, and I just kind of blended them, reblended them, applied, reapplied, removed, with some of that kind of blending process. But I feel that this image here has a certain degree of weight to it. It doesn't just look like a window for that background cloud stamp that we started off with, right? And I think that makes for a more effective photo stamping project like that, when you give things a little bit of weight to it, and they're not just transparent see-through types of images on the top of it. And that just involves, after you stamp it out, look for the shadows within the designs, okay? And just reiterate that with your pens, okay? It looks a little clunky sometimes, so you just add it in there underneath the top, and then just go in there with a lighter version and blend it out. Or you can do like I did, go light, then dark, then light again. Now sometimes I went light, dark, light, dark, light, but I usually end up with light, you know, that blending aspect, okay? You can see a little bit of a stronger shadow underneath these waves here. You can go a little bit more. Oops, that's removing ink. Like this. And that adds, am I adding anything on? Oh, I know what happened. You have to do this before you add in the pigment ink. See, I'm trying to add in a little bit more alcohol ink right here, but I have pigment ink there, so it's not applying to the paper. So save your pigment ink aspects, you know, for the, you know, the last part. But you can see underneath right in here, I've given it a little bit of a brown shadow. In here, in the blue areas of the water, I gave it blue shadows, okay? So don't always think about shadows as being black or gray, unless you're doing monochromatic black and white grayscale scenes. So, you know, things are colors, shadows of a color are usually just darker versions of that color. So this is a yellow pad right here. This is not black or gray. It's just a, you know, a darker version of that yellow that's out here, right? And it's the same thing for any type of colored object, okay? And the white pigment ink, going in here and adding in that little white pigment ink throughout here gives a little bit more continuity and kind of visual textural changes, which lend themselves to variation and range. And if you have a stronger range in terms of all things, value, light to dark, texture, sharp and soft, you know, those little white little specular light prints, you know, dots in there are perfect examples of something really sharp next to something really soft. You're really expanding just the visual range of a scene and potentially giving your overall end result a lot more richness to it. Okay, so anyways, hope you enjoyed the piece. I had a lot of fun doing these different techniques on here. For me, the thing that I tried today was the masking of that top portion and, you know, strengthening my horizon line with alcohol inks this time. And then kind of masking it from below and adding the softer things in there. So that's what I learned with this one. Playing around with that, I'm always trying to learn new things and to expand, even, you know, in a very minor way, the way that I use media on different types of surfaces and whatnot. So seeing what works and what doesn't. Okay, so anyways, thanks again, and let's say if you have any comments, leave them down in the comment section. If you like this video, I hope you hit the like button.